طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So last time I recited a little bit from Kitab al-Zakat, a little bit, we didn't do much. I'm going to repeat them again and then try and get through as much of Zakat. I'm hoping for during this session and next session we get through Zakat, and then Siyam is usually just one session because it's not very long. And then we start with Kitab al-Manasik, which is pilgrimage, and we'll spend the rest of the semester there. Once I get through the entirety of Kitab al-Zakat, I'll put out what the assignment is. It's not going to be very complicated, just a summary of that section and some explanations of modern applications of Kitab al-Zakat in the setting that we're in. Because he doesn't talk obviously about bank accounts and all that other stuff. I'm going to talk to you about that myself. So I'm going to start with وَمَنْ كَانَ لَهُ دَيْنٌ. So I'm going to start from this part over here. يقول المصنف رحمه الله نفعنا بعلمه ومن كان له دين أو حق من صداق وغيره على مليء أو غيره أدى زكاته إذا قبضه لما مضى. So whoever is owed money for a right such as a dowry, for example, or the like, by someone who is able to fulfill it or anyone else, someone able to pay, for example, when he takes possession of what is owed, he pays zakat for what is past. So if you owe me something and you can pay me, but you didn't, and I didn't ask for it, like I didn't go after you to get the payment, once I get the payment from you, I owe zakat for every year that went by that I didn't pick it up. Right? And this is not just the Hanbali who's madhab that think this, just in case you're surprised. It's other madhab have the similar opinion. So, because this is, we have to be careful of methods to avoid paying zakat. So if I have, for example, $50,000 and I go and I give it to you, and I say, take this as a dain from me. So you take it, and into mali, you have a lot of money, you don't need this, and you just keep it for years, you never give it, you don't give it back. I don't ask you for it, you don't give it back to me. And then when you give it back to me, I have to actually count how many years did you hold it, and I pay zakat for all those years. Unless you wouldn't give it to me. If you wouldn't give it to me, then that's different. I don't owe, imal maghsoob, meaning you took the dayn and I asked for it back and you didn't give it to me. If you couldn't pay it, I also don't have to pay zakat for the Hanbali madhab. In the Hanbali madhab, I don't have to. Other madhab have different opinions. Other madhab say that any dayn that is given that is more than nisab, I owe zakat every year for it, even if you couldn't pay it to me. And I don't necessarily agree with that opinion, but that opinion is there in the madhab. For the Hanbali, it's not. They don't see that. All right. A dowry is similar, just to point that out here. A dowry is similar. So, al-mahr, al-sadaq. He said, إِمَّا كَانُ دَيْنٌ أَحَقٌّ مِّن صَدَاقٍ. So, if a lady is owed her mahr by her husband, which is the muakhar, right? That's the mahr, and he can pay and he doesn't, and she doesn't ask for it, she owes zakat for every year if it's more than nisab. Like if it's more than the amount that we're going to discuss here within this session, inshallah ta'ala. So that's why it's important for men and for women to understand what the muakhar on the contract is. The muakhar is basically her mahr. It's just you don't have enough money to pay her the full mahr. So you're paying her. So this idea of, okay, the muqaddam is 10,000 and the muakhar is 1,000,000 is not smart. It's like, I'm going to make sure you can never divorce her by putting 1,000,000. No. This is the mahr. You are just dividing the mahr into two set timings because the young man is not wealthy and his parents aren't wealthy enough to pay the mahr all up front. Or it's better to pay the mahr all up front. So the idea of dividing the mahr is not original in Islam. It was added later due to a financial status that people were in, that they could not pay all of the mahr. Meaning what the mahr was reasonably priced at or put at or set at, people didn't have the ability to pay it. So they said instead of bringing the mahr down to the point where it's no longer worth anything, we keep it at that amount. We just divide it. We say you pay up front this amount and the rest is dayn. The rest you owe it to this person. Once you have it, you pay it. So it's a dayn. So the muakhar of the mahr is nothing but debt. So when he just talked about debt a second ago, it applies to the muakhar of the mahr. And people don't like hearing this because they didn't know that to begin with. But this is the reality of the matter. The muakhar of the mahr is nothing but debt. You don't only owe it when they divorce. No. You owe this when you die. The first thing that is done is that is taken out of your inheritance so that you're not punished in the grave for it. Right? Immediately. And if you don't end up having that money in your life, then before you have to establish with your wife whether she's going to forgive that dayn or not. Because it's so people who put in ridiculous amounts of money as sadaq and the mu'akhir al-mahr, it's very ill advised. I don't even attend these weddings. When someone I ask them what the mahr is. If they give me a crazy number, I don't attend, because he's dumb. He doesn't understand what he's doing, and she doesn't understand what she's doing either. Like, this is what is the mahr? The mahr should be this amount. Okay, that's what you want. Can he pay it all up front? No. How much can he pay up front? Take that, and then he'll owe the rest of you a bit throughout time. He'll pay you, but he has to give it to you. And if he has it and he doesn't give it to you, and you didn't ask for it, then you owe zakat for all the years that happened once you get it. So be very careful, because that's your wealth in his hands. As a wife, as a woman, that's your wealth in his hands. So if he owes you another $35,000 and he has it and you never asked for it, then that's your wealth in his hands. So you have to understand that but if you keep it there and you don't ask for it, then you owe that money. You're like, well, we have one bank account trying to buy a house. I don't care what you're going to do with your money. It's your money. Do what you want with it. Just understand that once that money is there, you have to ask for it, or the zakat is going to be owed from it. Meaning, he pays zakat on the money in the bank, but he doesn't give you the full 35,000. No, he'll give you whatever is deducted from the zakat, because you are paying zakat as well, right? Or else you have to ask for your money and then do with it whatever you want. So we have to understand what mahr is, and then what mu'akhir al-mahr looks like, and how to deal with that. Because I come from Syria, this is what they used to do. They used to just make the mu'akhir ridiculous, like a stupid number. A number that you would think was a joke at the beginning, and they're like, no, you're serious. نص مليون نص مليون ايش what نص مليون pebbles نص مليون what feathers نص مليون lira where you are never if I sell you're not worth نص مليون. Like the aris who's coming in, if I sold him, he wouldn't be worth 500,000 lira. So how are you going? You're never going to make this money in your life. So, and this is dayn alayk. When you die, you have to be paid, or she has to forgive it. So don't put numbers that you cannot within your foreseeable future actually pay to the person. All right, because it becomes a dayn. Yeah.
If the one who is supposed to give the mu'akhir has the money and has it, and how passed when he owns the money but he didn't pay it.
Yeah.
He pay for the zakat for that one.
He has to pay zakat if it's from his own wealth, obviously. But even the woman, who owns that money, when she's given the money, she has to pay zakat again, because that's her money in someone else's hand. She should have taken that. ولا زكاة في مال من عليه دين ينقص النصاب ولو كان المال ظاهرا وكفارة كدين. So zakat is important. Zakat is not owed from the wealth of someone whose debt brings it below the minimum amount, even if the property subject to zakat is visible, like livestock or grains or fruit. So if I have with me more than nisab, so let's say I have $15,000, which is more than nisab, and we'll talk about what nisab means, and we'll talk about what the number is exactly very soon. So I have $15,000, but I owe a certain amount of money. I owe a certain amount of money to you. And if I take out what I owe you, then I don't have nisab anymore, then I don't pay zakat on this money. That's the Hanbali position. The Shafi'is don't carry that position. They say you have to pay that money. Now, if you tell me, well, I owe student loans, it doesn't matter. I owe a mortgage, it doesn't matter. These things don't matter. Why? Because these are different types of debts that didn't exist back then. A debt is an amount of money that you take from someone and you have to return by a certain time. Like by a certain date, all that money has to be returned. These loans don't work that way. These are just based on installments. So as long as you're paying these installments, you can continue to carry this debt for 30, 40, 50 years, 100 years. It doesn't matter to them. They're not actually asking you. The bank and the university aren't knocking on your door asking for this money. They just want you to pay an installment. As long as you pay a specific amount a month, which is usually very small, then they're not asking you for anything. So you don't treat these debts that way. Not even for the Hanbali madhab, just to be clear. Because the Hanbalis, they define debt very clearly. They define a debt in a very, very clear way. And what we have today in terms of student loans and credit cards and mortgages and blah, 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 these don't qualify as exactly a debt. They qualify as, it's a form of debt, but it's not a form of debt that would have this law applicable to. And an expiation or a kafara is the same as a debt, so it's treated the same way. A kafara, if you owe a kafara, it's treated the same way. When ملك نصابا صغارا انعقد حوله حين ملكه. If one takes ownership of a minimum amount of nisab, of mature, for example, livestock, the duration begins with the ownership. So the moment you start counting the year, the Hijri year, is the moment you own the nisab. The moment you start you own enough whether it's livestock or it's actual current, it's actually athman, it's naqd, meaning it's gold and silver, or it's urud al-tijara, or it's something trade goods. So whatever, once they add up, any of these add up to the nisab, that's the day you start calculating the nisab, the hawl, the year. And I'll teach you how to do it in a way that for people who have bank accounts can do it appropriately. وإن نقص النصاب في بعض الحول أو باعه أو أبدله بغير جنسه لا فرارا من الزكاة انقطع الحول وإن أبدله بجنسه بنى على حوله. So the duration is interrupted when the minimal amount decreases during part of the duration. This is because the condition is absent. But a small decrease is overlooked for currency and trade goods such as 1 or 2 grains, for example. The duration is also interrupted when one sells it, even when the right of return is stipulated, or exchanges it for something of another type, while not seeking to avoid paying zakat by doing that. Now zakat, obviously, as taxes, is something that people will try to avoid, especially those who lack iman. They'll try to find ways to get around it. So a lot of these rulings are here to try and protect zakat from being avoided or by others. So if trade goods are bought with or sold for money and it's one's intention to flee from zakat, the zakat would not be dropped. It stays. If someone exchanges something for the same type, like 40 sheep for 40 more sheep, it builds in the previous duration. So what is he saying here exactly? He's saying if you have nisab, let's say I have the amount of money, so I have $6,000, $7,000, and then I use 2,000, so now I have less than nisab. So technically for the Hanbalis, you reset the timing. You don't count the hawl anymore. The clicker, the timer that was going off for the year stops once you have less than nisab, and then you start again when you have nisab again, unless you do an exchange of the same good. So if you send out, for example, $2,000 out of your bank account, so now it's less than nisab, and then I give it to you, and then you give me back $2,000 to put back in my bank account. I don't reset. It doesn't reset because it's the same min jinsihi. It's from the same nature. But if, for example, if I'm selling, I put $2,000 and I bought a sheep with that, right? Then I don't say, well, the sheep plus this is now this is now less than nisab, so I don't count anymore. And the sheep, it depends. Do I have enough sheep to count nisab, or do I not have enough sheep to count nisab? The way I'm going to teach you to pay your zakat from your bank account is going to be a little bit different, and it's due to the fact that the financial system of today is different than it was when this book was written, and all the books of fiqh were written for that matter, because there's not a book of fiqh that was written during a time where the financial or economical system actually of today applied even partially, and we didn't have this mess that we have today. And I'll explain what I mean in a moment, because your bank account, it receives money and then loses money. Receives money. So what are we doing? Are we resetting every? How is it going to work? Especially when you're being paid. Now you have nisab. Then you pay the mortgage. Now you don't have nisab. Then you get your child tax benefit. Now you have nisab. And then you go pay for the private school. You don't have nisab. So you don't do that. We don't do that piece. But for the sake of kind of earlier, older financial systems, you would have nisab, and if you pay or you remove something of it, or you sell it, or you don't have nisab anymore, then you reset the timer on it. So the timer does not continue. But for bank accounts, we're going to do it a little bit differently, just because of how people are paid today. وتجب الزكاة في عين المال ولها تعلق بالذمة. The zakat is obligatory from the same type of property. So the owner may extract the zakat from other lots of the same type. Any growth after zakat became obligatory belongs to him. If he destroys the property for which zakat is owed, he is required to pay its obligation. So you owe zakat from the property itself. So we're gonna establish that once we talk about livestock very clearly. But when we talk about wealth and trade goods are valued, or they are, the value of them is seen based on currency. So you don't have to, if you have a house and you have to pay zakat for it, you don't chop off a room and then give it as zakat. Like, you don't have to give from the house itself something, but you have to give from what the house was valued by, which is by currency. So it's valued by currency, so you're going to pay your zakat by currency. I'll explain to you when that actually applies, inshallah. ولا يعتبر في وجوبها إمكان الأداء ولا بقاء المال. So having the opportunity to pay is not a factor for zakat being obligatory. There's a lot of again. The explanation is very extensive. This is the explanation of the sharh. So I just want to choose the pieces that matter to me. And zakat is not dropped because the property has become destroyed, whether or not by negligence. It doesn't make a difference. So it is still owed. The exception to this is crops. If crops get burnt before hasad or after hasad, then you don't pay zakat from them. But other things, you still owe zakat upon it. So when it comes to being obligatory, whether the opportunity to pay is there or not, doesn't make a difference. You still owe the zakat. You're like, well, I didn't find anyone to give it to. No, you still owe that zakat. So you have to remove that money and put it aside until you find a way to pay it. And baqa'ul mal, meaning whether the mal is there. Like, for example, if you owed zakat, and then after you owed zakat, it got burnt, you still owed zakat, right? If I owed zakat for a trade good, I owed it. Today was the 30th, was the hawl, and I owe now something for it, and it got burnt to the ground. I still owe. Once you owe, you owe. That won't go away. That won't stop because of anything, right? Was zakatu kaddaini fi tarika. Zakat is like a debt against the inheritance. So if someone passes away, and they owed zakat for that year or years before, and it wasn't paid, then it's removed from the tarika, from the inheritance, before we give the heirs their wealth, right? We give it. Now, he doesn't talk about this here, but that is left up to the heirs, especially in a time where we don't have an Islamic judicial system. So if you have an Islamic judicial system, then the judge would do that, whether the heirs wanted to or not. But today, because we don't have that, and the heirs can say, he didn't pay zakat, Allah la yuruddu, this is his problem, I'm not going to pay zakat for him and take my money, he can hasab Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because sometimes you have abna or banat aqeen. You have like children who don't care about where their parents go yawm al-qiyamah, so you didn't pay zakat, they don't have no interest, they want their money, so they take it and they don't pay zakat for the other person. And that وَيَتَعَلَّقْ بِذِمَّتِهِ, meaning that person will continue to owe that zakat in his grave, and that's like the worst thing you can owe. Be very careful and make sure that if you have people that you love who don't pay zakat, when they pass away, try to get those who inherit them to pay zakat from their wealth. Even if it's like 15 years worth of it, let them pay it, because that's going to be stuck with them in their grave till the day they die, till Yawm al-Qiyamah. All right, so he starts now with zakat on livestock. So we're going to talk about, I told you about, there's certain types of zakat is owed against livestock. It's owed against crops from the ground. It owes against fruits and trees. It's owed against naqd, meaning gold and silver. And it's owed against trade goods. 5 masarif, 5 things that zakat is owed upon. So you need to know each one and how it works. So livestock, we're going to jog through this, because I don't care if you know these terms or not. They don't matter to you unless you're a rancher or you own a farm. This is not going to be important to you, but I want you to understand the basics. قال باب زكاة بهيمة الأنعام تجب في إبل وبقر وغنم إذا كانت سائمة الحول أو أكثره. So zakat for camels, cows, sheep, and goats. Those are the 4 that we talk about livestock, right? And anything that is extremely similar to them or from the same type, so he goes into, he talks about buffalo, for example, because those are technically domesticated cows. So any animal that is considered as a subtype from these 4 categories, you owe zakat amongst them. If they are for milk and reproduction, but not for labor, and if they graze from the wild herbage the whole lunar year or most of it. We're not talking about owning cattle with the intention of selling them as meat or selling them for, no. If you're intending to sell them, then they become trade goods, and they're treated as trade goods, and that's how they are valued, right? That's how they're appraised. But for livestock here, we're talking about if you own sheep and own cattle for their milk and for reproduction. So they reproduce, and then you use it for their milk and for the use for your own, for meat and stuff like that. So if that's what you have, then إذا كانت سائمة الحول أو أكثره, it has to be livestock that eat from wild grass, from herbage, like they eat for free, like they're just grazing in the land for the majority, for over 50% of the year. If for over 50% of the year you are paying to feed them, then no zakat is owed on them at all. Like you don't, again, I'm talking about livestock that are owed for milk and reproduction, not for selling. Once you have the intention of selling the animal, now they're going to be appraised as a trade good. Right? So be very careful with this. Make sure this is very clear to you. So he goes on and he starts talking about this is the way. This is how we like. If I want to fail you in the exam, I'll just focus on this piece here, because whenever they want to fail us on an exam, and they would just فيجب في 25 من الإبل بنت مخاض وفيما دونها في كل 5 شاة وفي 36 بنت لبون وفي 46 حقة وفي 61 جذعة وفي 76 بنت لبون وفي 91 حقتان فإذا زادت على 120 واحدة فثلاث بنات لبون ثم في كل 40 بنت لبون وفي كل 50 حقة. So I challenge you to for everything I owe to memorize this. If you memorize this, then and you can come and take my place. These are very difficult ones. What I do care about for you to memorize is just the meanings of some of these words. Like, what does bint laboon mean? Right? So you'll find I think they have a glossary for this explained somewhere. So yeah, so if you look down here, you'll see. So first of all, bint makhad. So a 1-year-old female camel. Bint laboon, a 2-year-old female camel. It's a hukka, I don't know why I said hukka. A 3-year-old female camel. A jad'a, a 4-year-old female camel. Right? So these are the 4 words. Just know what they mean. So bint makhad, bint laboon, hukka, jad'a. Know these 4 terms. For every number of camels, you're going to owe a certain thing. All right. So when you start counting, I'm going to tell you what you need to memorize. For camels, when you start counting for zakat, how many do you have to own? 5. You own 5. Once you own 5, what do you own? What do you owe? Shat. Shat is a small sheep. So this is the only time where you owe a different type of animal. So if you have 5 camels and you have them for the sake of milk or reproduction, then if a full year goes by, then you owe a sheep. And the word shat we will explain in a moment. I'll go through all these words. And then and for every 5, another shat. Another 5. Once you hit 25, you start paying by camels. You give mint makhal. You give a 1-year-old camel as zakat, and then it goes on beyond that. You start other calculations come in. I don't want you to know these calculations. Just know how many camels. I'm going to ask this question. How many camels do you need to have to start counting for the year of zakat? 5. All right, that's all you need to know. And then after that, it's calculations. Yes. You can do either. You can get a shat and give it as zakat, or you can see how much are shat, that money, and then pay that. Both of them are fine. Okay. ويجب في 30 من البقر تبيع أو تبيعة وفي 40 مسنة ثم في كل 30 تبيع وفي كل 40 مسنة. So the obligatory number for cattle is going to be 30. And for each 30 you give a tabi'ah. So it's a 1-year male or female calf. So 1 year male or female calf. And for 40 you give a musinna, which is 2-year. Okay? So for the camels you're going to know 4 things. You're going to know bint makhad, which is the 1-year-old female, and then bint laboon, 2-year, and then hiqqa, 3-year, and then jad'a, 4. Right? For the baqar, it's just 2 traces. Tabi', which is 1-year-old, and then musinna, which is 2 years old. And then again, I'll just ask you, how many cattle do you need to start doing your calculations? 30. It's 30 cattle. He does have a nice little thing here. Oh, I forgot to move forward. Subhanallah. Yeah, I don't think he has it in this, but in the book he has a nice little jadwal that you can look at, inshallah ta'ala. Well, usually I didn't really care to put this even in the slides, because I don't need you to know all this. I just want you to know some basic terminology, just some of the nomenclature. ويجزئ الذكر هنا وابن لبون مكان بنت مخاض وإذا كان النصاب كله ذكورا. Here a male suffices, a tabi'ah for 30 cows. A 2-year-old male camel and a 3-year-old male camel and a 4-year-old male camel will suffice for the place of a 1-year-old female, meaning anything that's 1 year. So you need a 1-year older male to suffice for a younger female when it comes to camels. A male suffices if the minimum amount are all males. If it's all males, you can give. Yani, it doesn't have to have bint labun. It can be an ibn labun if everything, if the whole herd is just males and it's not females. Right. ويجب في 40 من الغنم شاة وفي 121 شاتان وفي 201 ثلاث شياه ثم في كل 100 شاة. So the obligatory amount for goats and sheep, because they're treated basically the same, is 40. And then what you give for each is a shah, which is a 1-year-old sheep and a 2-year-old goat. So either or. Yeah. والخلطة تصير المالين كالواحد. Mixing makes two properties like one. This is if there is a minimum amount of nisab of livestock and the two owners are eligible for its obligation. And we can leave that. We don't have to go into detail with that because that's a little bit complicated. But yeah, anyone who's a rancher can come and ask these questions and I can help them. But aside from that, that's all you need to know. All right, so let's do zakat on crops. باب زكاة الحبوب والثمار. This is important. تجب في الحبوب كلها ولو لم تكن قوتا وفي كل ثمر يكال ويدخر كتمر وزبيب. So zakat is so we're talking about crops now. We're talking about that which is seasonal in terms of it being harvested from the ground. We're not talking about trees. So trees are thimar. We'll talk about trees in a moment, but we're talking about crops, which is different. So zakat is obligatory on all grains, even if they are not foodstuffs like qut. That's the Hanbali madhab. The Shafi'is don't see it that way. The Shafi'is have the main aqwat al-muddakhara. They only count wheat and barley and lentil and and rice. But the Hanabila see anything that comes, all hubub, all grain, regardless of what type of grain, and all fruit that is measured and stored, such as dates and raisins and almonds. And so here he's going through. He's going to talk about the crops and he'll talk about the thimar. And when he talks about thimar, they see every thamar, the Hanabila, all of the fruits, not just tamr and zabib, because the Shafi'iyya only see tamr and zabib. They only talk about dates and raisins, which is basically grapes. They don't look at apples. Only the later Shafi'is started doing that. But the Hanabila from the beginning, as the Hanafis, they see everything that comes from the ground is going to have a zakat, whether it's a crop or whether it's going to be taken from a tree. Regardless of whether it's qut muddakhar, it's going to be, whether it's a major or a mainstream crop that people need, or whether it's not, and whether it's a fruit that is known to the people or is not a fruit that is known. Okay. ويعتبر بلوغ نصاب قدره 1600 رطل عراقي. In order for zakat to be obligatory, the crop must reach the minimum amount after removing the grain from the husk or drying them, and it adds up to around 600 over 600 kilos. So the easiest number is remembering 600 kilo. Once you go beyond 600 kilos, whether you're taking it from the ground crops like wheat and barley and whatnot, or you are harvesting apples and dates and tamar, and the weight has to be a clean weight. You can't have like branches being added on, and the husks have to be removed from the wheat. So it's just the grain. So the grain, once it's 600, then the zakat is going to be owed from that. وتضم ثمرة العام الواحدة بعضها إلى بعض في تكميل النصاب لا جنس إلى آخر. So fruits and crops of the same type from a single lunar year are combined together, even if a crop has a biannual yield. So when it comes, for example, to wheat, if you are, for example, if you are harvesting wheat more than once a year, like you live in a place where you're able to grow wheat twice a year. So if in both times you didn't hit nisab, but together you did, then you owe. Right? So if the first harvest was 400 kilos, you didn't hit, but the second harvest was all 400 kilos within one lunar year, then that's 800, so you owe from that. But you don't add two different crops together. So you don't add wheat and barley together. No, if wheat is 400, barley is 400, adis is 400. No, each one is separate in terms of how they are looked like. But the different types are not combined together. So raisins and dates are not combined to complete the minimal amount, just as with livestock. ويعتبر أن يكون النصاب مملوكا له وقت وجوب الزكاة، فلا تجب فيما يكتسبه اللقاط أو يأخذه بحصاده، ولا فيما يجتنيه من المباح كالبطم والزعبل وبزر قطونة ولو نبت في أرضه. So what is considered is that the minimum amount of one's property is one's property at the time that zakat becomes obligatory, which is when it becomes apparent that the crop is sound. Thus, zakat is not owned from the grain that scavengers acquire or harvesters receive as wages. So if you have the harvesters and they come and they take a certain amount of the grain, and there are scavengers who pick up some of that grain, those aren't added to the harvest. Is what you take, is how much you actually take. That's what is looked at. So this comes from like a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ and certain things. So he, again, a first level fiqh won't talk about the different opinions in the madhab, and it won't talk about the adillah. No, I don't. No. So that's set. That's set. But I will. There's a few comments I'm going to make for you in a moment, and we'll see if that answers what you're thinking about. So neither is zakat owed from harvesting something unplanted, a mountain wheat or cotton seed, even if it grows on his land. So things that just grow, there's no zakat on that. So, for example, in our village, there used to be certain types of certain things that would just come out of the ground. We don't plant it. It's just everywhere. So you just go and you harvest it. Even if you harvest 1,000,000 kilos, you don't pay zakat on that. You only pay on that which you have planted, and you're harvesting, and it's qut muddakhar, or qut, meaning something that people. So if you go back to the beginning of this, so he points out something here. تجب في الحبوب كلها ولو لم تكن قوتا وفي كل ثمن يكال ويدخر. So he uses the word يكال ويدخر. Anything that is weighed and that can be turned into mu'na, in the slang muni. So what you leave, what you're able to keep for the winter. That is what zakat is obligatory upon. Why? Because zakat, the idea of it is that people don't go through the winter and starve. So if you take wheat, because wheat is taken and then it's put in it's put in bins and it's left throughout the winter so you can live and eat. So you had to give zakat on that, so that people who are poor have something for the winter. That was the basic understanding behind it, and it still applies. Like that still applies. But I'm saying to you what they're looking at. They're looking at certain types of grain that can be saved or held for long periods of time and then used later in different timings. All right. يجب عشر فيما سقي بلا مؤنة ونصفه معها وثلاثة أرباعه بهما فإن تفاوتا فبأكثرهما نفعا ومع الجهل العشر. So the obligatory amount is 1/10 of what is irrigated effortlessly. Half of that where there is effort, and that's all. I'm going to end with that, and the other it doesn't. And if you don't know, then you just give 1/10. So for both, 600,000 comes out, right? 60,000 is going to be given. Sorry, 600 is taken out, and 60 is going to be given. So 600 kilos is going to be taken on the ground. So what's ushur? What's a 1/10? 60. If you put the water was you had to work for it, then 30. If you had to work for it, then it's 30. And I'm going to explain something in a moment. وإذا اشتد الحب وبدأ صلاح الثمر وجبت الزكاة ولا يستقر الوجوب إلا بجعلها في البيدر فإن تلفت قبله بغير تعد منه سقطت. So it is important. Zakat becomes obligatory when grains become firm and fruit appears to be sound. The obligation is not established unless the crop is placed on the threshing floor. If it perishes beforehand without maliciousness or negligence, the zakat is dropped. So the zakat becomes obligatory upon you once it's ripened, but you don't actually pay it until you harvest it and it's ready. If you harvest it and then it burns, then you don't owe it for this. Unlike trade goods and other things, for this you don't owe it anymore, especially unless it was negligence. I mean, it was your fault. If it wasn't your fault, then you don't owe. ويجب العشر على مستأجر الأرض دون مالكها. The 10th is obligatory for the land's renter, not its owner. Right? It's upon the person who's actually planting and seeding, not on the owner of the land. And we'll talk about this more in في الإجارة في باب الإجارة. We don't have to go into detail right now. وإذا أخذ من ملكه أو موات من العسل 160 رطلا عراقيا ففيه عشره. If one takes 160, he takes the 600 basically of honey from his own property or from abandoned lands, 1/10 is owed on the honey. 1/4 of a 10th is owed from mined gold or silver when it reaches the minimum amount. 1/4 of a 10th is owed from everything else extracted from the ground if it reaches minimum amount, and if the person for whom it is extracted is someone for whom it's obligatory to pay zakat. So whatever comes from the ground, if it reaches zakat, you owe it immediately, unlike the year is dropped. So if I'm extracting gold and silver from the land, if I extract the nisab of gold and silver, which we're going to discuss if I extract that from the land, I owe zakat immediately. I don't owe it in a year because it's extracted from the land. Or if you find something. وَالرِّكَازُ مَا وُجِدَ مِن دَفْنِ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ فَفِيهِ الْخُمْسُ فِي قَلِيلِهِ وَكَثِيرِهِ. So treasure, rikaz, is anything found that is pre-Islamic and buried, like anything that's buried that we don't know who it belongs to, and we can't track exactly who owns this. Then 1/5 of that is owned from zakat, whether small or large amounts. There's no nisab. If you pick up a treasure from your land, and of course, unless you're living in a place where the hukuma is going to come and take you and the treasure and your family, and then you owe from that treasure a certain amount. Yeah. So every time yeah. So what you would do if you're a miner, if that's what if you own a mine, is that every you would calculate for every month. Right, and then we calculate how much you have, and then you pay zakat on that immediately, 2.5%. Yeah. No. Oil, there's a difference of opinion, but water, no. Okay. Yeah, even if you're trying to sell it, yeah. There's a whole different thing for water altogether. So now, the piece that I usually share with people at the end of this topic specifically. So today, there's a different problem with crops and trees, where farmers have to spend a lot of money that they didn't have to spend when these books were written. So they have to use mubidat hashariya, they have to pesticides, they have to use that, and they have to pay for the water, not just work for it. They have to pay for it, and they have to pay for the maintenance of the place, and they have to pay for its packaging. So they end up there's a certain amount of money that's being put in order for them to be able to sell this that didn't exist in these times. So the question is, do we extract that amount first, or do you pay zakat and then that amount is just whatever, like it's a cost that you have to absorb, right? So there's two opinions on this matter. The majority say that you absorb that. But there are opinions in all four madhahib, all four of them, Hanbali included, especially the later scholars, and there are fatwa online that I usually share whenever I give these sessions, and I'll put them in the slide where you can go and read them. I don't know if they're in English; most of them are in Arabic, but I share them because the Azhar and the Awza'i and the Majma' al-Buhuth fi Saudiya, they all put out this fatwa at certain times where they say there are three ways to do it: either you absorb, or you meet it halfway, meaning you only remove half. Or you're allowed, which is the opinion that I think is most reasonable, is what Shaykh Qaradawi used to give Allah yarhamah before he passed away, is that you remove, because if you listen to what we said a second ago, he said that when it comes to the zakat, the nisab, it's not about everything that the scavengers pick up and the harvesters take, right? You don't count that, you just count what's there. So they already excluded what the harvesters are taking and the scavengers are picking up. So it makes sense to remove all the other expenses. And if you still have nisab, like if you still owe, then you pay zakat, and if you don't, because zakat is not supposed to be a reason for someone to lose wealth in their endeavor. Like zakat should not be forced. You shouldn't be forced to pay zakat if you went into an endeavor and you lost money. Like if you went in and you planted wheat to sell and you ended up losing, like you spent more than you actually ended up selling, then you shouldn't be forced to pay zakat on something where you lost money. And this fatwa is well established today and talked about by scholars. And I think it's very valid. It's taken from the wordings in these books, because he pointed out that what the harvesters take and what the scavengers pick up is not counted. Well, if we're not counting that, then why would we count also what I have to pay the marketer, and I have to pay the packaging, and I have to pay the pesticide guy, so maybe they take, then there's not enough for nisab. If there's nisab left after removing all of that, so if you harvested a million, a thousand, a ton, and then you extracted you paid the people who harvested it, and you extracted how much you paid for water and for this and for this, and you ended up with an amount of money that would add up to more than 600 kilos, then you pay نصف العشر. What's نصف العشر? يعني 1 out of 20, يعني 5%, right? So you pay 5%, and if you don't, if you have less than 600, then you don't pay anything at all, right? And And the fact that you're paying for things, you're not going to owe. Like even if the water, like in Canada, even if the sky is taking care of the water piece, but you're paying for all these other things, you still only owe 5%. You don't owe 10%, just because. Yeah. So we don't go by just the water piece, because when they were saying that based on the fact that the only thing back then that you would have to actually put in was the water. You were going to do the work yourself, and that's fine, and you're going to pay the harvesters, and there's nothing else really that comes to zira aside from that. But today it's very much more complicated, so I think it's worthy, because the idea is not to make people broke. Like it's not to because when we don't make these proper assessments, we de-incentivize people from agriculture, and that's a big problem. That's a huge problem. There's a lot of farmers in the world don't farm anymore, and they don't keep their trees, and they don't they end up planting things that are useless, like tobacco and soya and all this other garbage that no one uses, and they're not actually putting in like the barley and the lentils, and this is the stuff that this is what's nutritious and people need to eat. So when you de-incentivize people with zakah, that becomes a problem, a maqasidi problem from maqasid al-sharia. So we have to go back and kind of reevaluate. Yeah.
So if there are partners in the land, and the land reached the nisab,
they act as if they're one person. Yeah, they're one person, and then they pay zakat as if they're one person. Yeah.
Put 10,000 into agriculture business, and you make just the nisab.
You owe. Yeah, you owe.
But if you sold what you made, you wouldn't make back what you put in. You were losing. You still at a loss.
What do you?
Like let's say 600 kilos doesn't make you the 10,000.
Yeah, then you don't. Yeah. So what I'm explaining is that at that point you wouldn't owe anything. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's in that point. For the older opinion is that no, 600 came out. You give away 5% immediately of it, and then you absorb whatever loss that you had. But you give that 5%. It's only 5%. So, like technically, if you've lost. Might as well give zakat. But I'm saying that there's an opinion today that is strong enough to say that no, if you have lost, that you don't have to pay. And I think that's a reasonable thing, because we want to give it incentive for people to grow, or else we're all gonna eat each other at the end. All right, so I'll just read a little bit about naqdain. It's not 9 o'clock yet, so don't get too. We're not doing a full hour, so don't get طولوا بالكم شوي. I know this is not the most exciting thing in the world, but this fiqh is how else are you going to learn how to do this. يجب بالذهب إذا بلغ 20 مثقالا وفي الفضة إذا بلغت 200 درهم ربع العشر منهما. So let's see, does he give us the amount or not? Where is it? So you give 2.5%, and yes, so we say 85 grams, right? 85 grams of dhahab. So 85 grams of dhahab is what we call nisab. He says 84.7 and all this stuff. What we do is this 85. Like that's the number that the scholars in Syria and Lebanon and Jordan and Saudi they've come to. So 85 grams of dhahab is nisab when it comes to naqdain. We're talking about gold and silver and money. So I had to spend a reasonable amount of time studying the difference between money and currency, because I am very illiterate when it comes to finance and economics. So money is something that has its own value to it. Currency is something that is based on something else, like its value is based on something else, or its value is based on trust. So it loses value with time. You see, I can print dollar bills, so I can make the value of the dollar bill go down because I'm printing more of it. I can't print gold. Gold is born in a supernova. Right? The amount of energy to make, there's only a specific amount of gold on this planet that we will only be able to extract as our numbers go. So its value, if you look historically, gold has always held its value if you look at the ranges. I'm not saying that there wasn't a fluctuation. No, there's fluctuation, but it's always held within a specific range that no other commodity on earth has held its value within. Not even things that are more valuable than gold, like different types of diamonds and whatnot. They don't hold that, but they fluctuate. Gold is probably the most stable commodity in the history of the human race. Silver goes up and down, but the way it was done back in the day was that gold was money and silver was currency. So back in the Islamic Khilafah, silver was a currency. It was used as currencies today, but it had its own value to it. Because silver still has its own value. So silver, and that's why that worked better for a long time. Today, I'm just giving you a piece of paper, and this piece of paper has nothing to back it up. It's just trust. It's just trust. If the government decides to print another 200 billion of these, it becomes completely worthless. Right? I don't know if you've understood this in your life. I only learned this in the last maybe 10 years of mine, of how this works. That if I right now have $1 million and I'm happy because it's worth something, right? So if the government just prints out a lot, and everyone has $1 million, so my million is no longer that valuable anymore because everyone else has it. I mean, I get a smaller piece of the same pie. It's like the same pie. We're not actually making anything new. And I have this much because I have $1 million. But now I give everyone else $1 million. My piece of the pie that I get is getting smaller. People get more. So basically, when you print money, I'm losing money. I'm losing value. Like what I have loses value as you print. Gold doesn't have that because no one can print gold. And it costs more to make gold. And the whole discipline of chemistry was called khimia in Arabic back in the day. And khimia, the goal of it was to make gold. That was the only goal. No, they cared about nothing. The goal was to make gold. And there was nothing else. They couldn't care less about anything. They didn't care about studying the basic elements and making a judge. No one cared about this. Not even the people who did this here. Like not even those alchemists who, they were trying to make gold, because if you can make gold, khalas, you're rich. But they found out that it's actually impossible. Gold is born in supernovas, which is explosions, which is not something that we can reproduce on the planet without burning everything and everyone here. So we're talking about gold here, right? So we're talking about 85 grams of gold, which if someone has a phone, they can look up what it adds to. It's maybe $7,000 to $8,000. I heard that it's more now. I heard like it's more $10,000. Yeah, that's what I heard. So if you're getting engaged soon, you're gonna have to buy dhahab. You're in big trouble if you're gonna buy 85 grams of gold for your wife. 11%. 7,000, yeah, and that's reasonable. 11% of the reserve of gold on the planet exists on the hands and legs and bodies of ladies from India. 11%. 11%. This is the number. They have more gold on their bodies than America has in its reserve. No, I'm not exaggerating. They have more. Like the States, with all of it, doesn't have as much gold as they just wear, which is just something you need to think about. No. We'll come to that. Yeah, don't worry. I'm not gonna. Yeah, don't worry. Whatever gold you're just using for wearing, we don't pay zakat in that. So just for now, just know 85. Memorize that number. Like know it really well, and know what it adds up to. That's where the nisab we start. So when we're talking about your bank account, because we're going to treat your currency as we treat money, even though there is a problem with doing that a little bit, and I'm going to talk about that at the end of this chapter. But for now, we're going to treat your currency as we treat money. So once you have 85 grams of gold in your bank account, you start counting your nisab. Your year begins. The year starts there. So once you have $7,000 in your bank account, you start counting for zakat. All right. So ويضم الذهب إلى الفضة في تكميل النصاب وتضم قيمة العروض إلى كل منها. So gold is combined with silver to complete the minimum amount. So and العروض meaning and trade goods. So you add dhahab and fidda together and any other trade goods. So when we talk about money and trade goods, we treat them the same way. Money and trade goods are treated the same way. So what we talked about so far, livestock that are there for milk, right? And we said this is how there's a certain number that you start giving zakat every year on. It's a yearly thing. Crops and fruits, right? Crops and fruits. Crops can also be vegetables, but crops and fruits, it doesn't matter. There's no year, right? It's when وَآتُوا حَقَّهُ يَوْمَ حَصَادِهِ. So when it's taken out of the ground, it has to be of certain nisab, certain conditions, and you give the zakat for that. 600 kilos is what we look at. Now, what's left of the 5 is money and currency, money and trade goods. Money and trade goods are treated the same way, just like crops and fruits are treated the same way. Money and trade goods also require a year. They have to be sitting around in your bank account for a full year, or you have to have them for a full year. Money, as in things you use to buy stuff with, and trade goods, as in things that you are planning to sell, or you have them because you want to sell. If you don't want to sell it, then this doesn't count. Right? So if you have a house and you are renting that house to people, you don't pay zakat on that. If you own two homes and you're living in both periodically and you don't want to sell either of them, you don't have them because you want to sell them, then you don't owe zakat on this. You owe zakat on things that you have the intention to sell them. The moment you have the intention to sell them, you start counting the year. Right? The moment you have intention to sell them, you start counting the year. So if a woman owns dhahab and fidda, and she's like, I wear this, and then she's like, I want to sell some of my dhahab and fidda. Now you start counting a year. Now you start counting a year. And then a year later, if you haven't sold, but you still want to sell, then you owe zakat. So there's going to be an aspect of zakat when it comes to certain possessions and assets where it's subjective to intention, which is normal in Islam. A lot of things are subjective to intention in Islam. And other things are not. Dhahab and fidda aren't. You can't say, no, I have dhahab and fidda, I don't want to sell them. I don't care if you want to sell them or not. Dhahab and fidda are money, so you're going to owe zakat if a year goes by, if it's over 85 grams of dhahab. I didn't talk about how much you owe for fidda, because in our lifetime, it's not going to matter. Like, you're never going to need that in your life unless you are someone who stores silver. In that case, you're going to have to come and we're going to have to talk about some details. But it's around 600 grams of silver, just as FYI, if you care. ويباح للذكر من الفضة الخاتم وقبيعة السيف وحلية المنطقة ونحوه ومن الذهب قبيعة السيف وما دعت إليه ضرورة كأنف ونحوه. So men are permitted to wear a silver ring, right? And what else? Are also permitted to use silver for the pommel of a sword, to decorate a leather waist belt, and the like. They may also use gold for the pommel of their sword and whatever is necessary, like a prosthetic nose and the like, or a tooth. So those things for a man, if he has a golden tooth, he doesn't owe zakat on he doesn't add that to the gold that he owns. Like if he has zakat, he has like 83 grams of gold, and he has 2 grams of gold on his tooth, he doesn't owe zakat just because that doesn't add. And if he has the pommel of his sword, anything that is used, that is accepted custom-wise, is not paid zakat on. And that's why you'll find some habits in places like Bangladesh where men wear golden rings. They don't, like they're of the Hanafi madhab, and they don't necessarily see the opinion that it's haram for men to wear all types of gold. They allow for rings. They allow for rings, and as a part of and their scholars allow for that. And I don't necessarily agree, but that's their urf. So in that case, he wouldn't count the ring, But I'm just explaining that when it's for personal use, you don't count that from your zakat. But men shouldn't have gold for themselves. Like you shouldn't have like your own gold thing for yourself, where you just walk around and look. You don't do that. But women are obviously allowed to. For a man, you can have a golden, a silver ring, and other silver usages can be for different things like a belt buckle and stuff like that. ويباح للنساء من الذهب والفضة ما جرت عادتهن بلبسه ولو كثر. So women are permitted to have and wear gold and silver, whatever manner and quantity they want, even if large amounts, as long as it fits with the custom. So the reason I said that now, because a second ago I told you how the sisters in India do. So there, the custom amount of gold and silver that you can own is way more than what you can own here in London. So today here, I don't know what the custom is because I am completely oblivious and ignorant on this issue because my wife doesn't really have a lot of gold, so I don't know what is actually custom. But whatever the custom is, a woman can own that gold, even if it's a lot, right? But if she goes beyond the custom, that's where she puts a big question mark, and we start saying that you should start paying after that. After what the custom after we decide what the custom of how much women should be owned in terms of personal use gold, if she owns more than that, if it's nisab, if what she owns more than that is nisab, then she should pay zakat on that. All right, and that's the safest way for a sister to get out of khilaf. Now, with that being said, if a sister has a lot of gold, but none of it she wants to sell, and all of that is just for personal use, then technically speaking, she can still not pay zakat on it. Now, you may say, but what if at some point I need to sell something because I'm poor? That doesn't change anything, because when you're poor, you'll sell anything. Like if you have a car, you're driving, you don't owe zakat on your car because you're using it, you don't have it for sale. But if you're broke, you're going to sell your car. So does that mean you pay zakat on your car? No, it's just because the circumstances are forcing you to do something. So if a lady has this gold and she has it and she's just using it for personal use, then she doesn't owe zakat. But if she has it and she's like, I'm having it, but I'm also using it to store wealth. Like her intention is also to store wealth instead of putting money in the bank account, store wealth so that we can use it later on, then no, that is going to be seen as gold. She can use it and wear it and everything, but she still has to pay zakat for it. So when it comes to ladies' jewelry, it's important that it's established appropriately in terms of what the intention actually is, and that's why it's best to stick to the urf What is the urf? How much does a lady usually own that? And then anything you own beyond that, just pay zakat once it hits 85 grams or more. All right. So I'm going to read just one more word and then I'm going to let you go. ولا زكاة في حليهما المعد للاستعمال أو العارية وإن أعد للكراء أو النفقة أو كان محرما ففيه الزكاة. So zakat is not required for men and women's jewelry that is ready to be used or is lent out, provided the lending is not an attempt to avoid zakat. Again, these things matter, so trying to evade zakat is, as you would evade taxes, is talked about in fiqh books. If the jewelry is ready to be rented or spent, or if it is unlawful, zakat is owed on it if it reaches the minimum nisab amount. If it's allocated for trade, zakat is owed from its value. So if you have, this is the last piece that you should know, if you own gold, if a woman owns gold, and it's for her personal use, but she rents it out to people, she owes zakat on that, right? If gold specifically, gold, if you rent out gold, right, then you owe zakat on that. Renting out other things, you don't necessarily owe zakat on that, but you do on gold, yes? No, the same thing, a year. Same thing, a year. So the moment you start renting out gold, no, the moment you start, it's when you're extracting from the ground that you owe immediately. But if she owns a certain amount of gold and she decides, this amount here, I'm going to start renting out. From that day, she counts a year. Yeah. No, she pays it on the gold. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the soundest opinion. There are other opinions here. I'm just giving you this. I'm not going into all the details and differences, but this is the soundest opinion, in my opinion. Okay, we'll start with that. We have zakat on trade goods, which I'll conclude next session, and payment and a few other things. So we'll finish zakat next session, and I'll talk to you about how to calculate zakat within your bank account and a few other pieces of zakat that I think is important for modern purposes. And then I'll give you the assignment for this semester, because it'll be just beyond zakat. And after that, Siyam and Hajj are a little bit quicker, because we'll kind of glide through that for the rest of November, and we'll finish this probably mid-December. This is probably a later course in terms of when it ends, because I want to finish this book at the end of this course. I'm not going to do a part 3. I'm going to finish up part 2. Even if we skip a few parts of within Hajj, there are a few parts that we can skip, meaning they're just like we skipped a little bit of the zakat livestock, because they're not as they don't affect us as much, inshallah. But generally speaking, we should be able to get through the entirety of the book. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanallah bihamdika la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. I will be away on one of the weeks. So not next week, but the week after I'll be away. So it'll be November 14th that I'm not here. What I may do is I may record something, so that we keep on moving in the matan a little bit. So I may record maybe half an hour worth of material just to go through the matan a little bit more, and then I'll post it. You guys can watch it, and then we'll come the week after, just so we finish things up, inshallah, on time. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.